Guests of a Mafia boss mocked the Black Maid. What happened next shocked everyone. Tiffany Johnson had always been the quiet type, the kind of person who preferred staying in the background. She'd been working at the lavish mansion of Mafia boss Jack Malone for almost a year now, and in all that time, she'd seen things that most people would only dream about. But it wasn't the wealth or the high-profile guests that made her nervous. It was the guests themselves. Tonight was no different. The elegant dining room gleamed under the chandelier's light, casting warm hues across the luxurious furniture, the polished floors, and the expensive china on the long dining table. The guests were all businessmen and women, some of them connected to the underground world, others merely acquaintances of Jack's. Tiffany, dressed in her modest black uniform, was serving drinks with the same practiced grace she had honed over the months. She barely made eye contact with the guests, always maintaining her distance. But tonight, there was a tension in the air. Tiffany could feel it. A whisper of judgment lingered in the room. She could hear the laughter, the mocking tone, as the guests made their usual comments about the staff. Tiffany kept her head down, trying to ignore them, but it was impossible to ignore the way they sneered at her. What's she even doing here? One guest chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. Just a maid, right? Tiffany's heart sank, but she swallowed her pride. She had been in worse situations before. She didn't want to rock the boat. But the words stung, each one cutting deeper than the last. Another voice joined in, louder this time. She shouldn't even be here with people like us. Tiffany's hands tightened around the tray she was carrying. She had heard it all before, but tonight felt different. She could feel the weight of their judgment in the pit of her stomach. She tried to focus on her work, but the laughter continued to echo in her ears. That's when Jack Malone stepped into the room. His presence was commanding, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. Tiffany noticed how his sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on her, and for the briefest moment, the mocking voices stopped. Jack Malone, the Mafia boss, had seen it all. His empire spanned far and wide, and he was used to power, fear, and respect. But tonight, he saw something that made his usually stone-cold expression falter for a fraction of a second. The way his guests were treating Tiffany, the way they were mocking her, something about it didn't sit right with him. Tiffany had always been quiet, always kept her head down, but she didn't deserve this. Jack knew that. He had seen many things in his life, but never had he witnessed such blatant disrespect for someone who, in his eyes, didn't deserve it. As the guests continued their whispers and laughter, Jack took a deep breath. His eyes narrowed, and without saying a word, he made his way toward Tiffany, his footsteps firm and decisive. The room fell silent as he approached. Tiffany didn't know what to expect. But then, in a move that no one saw coming, Jack reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're done for the night, Tiffany. Go take a break." His voice was calm, yet there was an edge to it that sent a shiver through the room. The guests were stunned into silence, unsure of how to react. But Jack wasn't done. Turning to the group of guests, he looked them dead in the eyes. "If any of you have a problem with that, feel free to leave. There's no place for that kind of behavior here." The guests exchanged nervous glances, realizing that Jack wasn't going to tolerate any more mockery. Tiffany stood there, shocked, as Jack guided her away from the table. The room was still, the tension palpable, but there was something different now, something more powerful. Tiffany could feel the weight lifting off her shoulders as Jack led her to a quieter part of the mansion, away from the judgmental eyes of the guests. For the first time in a long while, Tiffany felt a sense of relief. Jack's actions had surprised everyone, and his sudden defense of her wasn't just about protecting his staff. It was about doing what was right. Tiffany could hardly believe what had just happened. She had gone from being the target of ridicule to being protected by the man everyone feared. Jack turned to her and spoke softly. "You're not just some maid, Tiffany. Never forget that." As Jack walked away, Tiffany stood there for a moment, still trying to process the whirlwind of emotions. She had never expected this, never in her wildest dreams. And though the night was far from over, something had changed. Tiffany wasn't just the invisible maid anymore. She had been seen, and she had been defended. Tiffany stood still for a moment, her heart racing as Jack Malone guided her away from the chaos of the dining room. The air felt different now, charged with an energy she hadn't felt before. The other guests were still frozen in place, their surprised expressions etched in her mind. She had never seen Jack like this, so unyielding, so protective. As they moved through the grand hallway, Tiffany's mind raced. What had just happened? She had expected a simple night of serving drinks and managing the endless demands of wealthy guests. What she hadn't expected was this. Jack, the man who commanded respect with just a glance, had stepped in to protect her, and in doing so, he had shattered the hierarchy of his own party. Tiffany had always been quiet, always kept to herself. She had learned long ago that staying invisible was the safest way to survive. But tonight had changed everything. As Jack led her to a quieter part of the mansion, she tried to gather her thoughts. She had never imagined she would find herself in this position, being the one who was defended rather than the one who served. The mansion around her was opulent, filled with gold accents, towering marble pillars, and artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. But Tiffany didn't see any of it right now. All she could think about was Jack's words. You're not just some maid, Tiffany. Never forget that. The weight of those words sank deep into her. She wasn't just some maid. For the first time, someone had seen her. Really seen her. Tiffany had worked in this mansion for months. Always in the background. Always unnoticed by the guests and even by Jack, despite his occasional polite nod when their paths crossed. She had learned the unspoken rules of the house. Keep your head down, do your job, and never ask questions. But tonight, Jack had broken those rules. She had expected him to be like the others, cold, detached, unaffected by the people around him. But he wasn't. He had taken a stand for her, and in doing so, he had changed the entire dynamic of the evening. Tiffany took a deep breath, still processing. What had just happened? She had been humiliated, yes, but the shock of Jack's intervention was even more overwhelming. She had never imagined he would care enough to do something about it. And yet, here she was, standing in a quiet hallway, away from the guests and their judgment. Tiffany glanced at Jack, who was standing a few feet away, his posture relaxed but still exuding the air of authority that made everyone else in the room obey without question. He wasn't the same man he appeared to be at the table. Tiffany could see the way his eyes had softened when he had looked at her, the way he had taken her side without hesitation. She had expected to be dismissed, expected him to tell her to go back to her duties, but instead, he had defended her. And that meant something. Are you okay? Jack's voice broke through her thoughts, and Tiffany looked up to find him watching her intently. His eyes, usually so cold and calculating, were now filled with something she couldn't quite place. Concern, maybe. It was unexpected. I'm fine, Tiffany replied, her voice still shaky. She didn't know what else to say. The words felt so small compared to everything that had just happened. Jack studied her for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Good, he said, his tone softening slightly. You're not going back out there. You've done enough for tonight. Tiffany blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected him to go that far. She was just the maid. It wasn't like she mattered in the grand scheme of things. But here Jack was, telling her she didn't have to go back. That felt strange. But Tiffany hesitated, unsure of how to respond. But they'll be looking for me. I still have to. Jack raised a hand, cutting her off. No, you're done for the night. I'll make sure the rest of the evening goes smoothly. There was no room for argument in his voice. Tiffany wasn't sure what to say. She had never seen this side of him before. The Mafia boss, the feared man who ran his empire with an iron fist, was now standing before her, concerned about her well-being. It was a side of him she hadn't expected, and it made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Valuable. Tiffany nodded, the words stuck in her throat. She had been afraid that tonight would end with her being punished or dismissed for causing a scene. But instead, she was being protected. It was a small act of kindness, but it meant the world to her. As Tiffany stood there, Jack glanced around the hallway, then turned back to her. I'll have one of the staff bring you something to eat. You've earned a break. Tiffany gave him a small, uncertain smile. Thank you, she said quietly, still trying to process everything. Jack didn't respond immediately, but when he spoke again, his voice was a little softer, a little more human. You deserve more than what you've been given here, Tiffany. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than that. Tiffany felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove her worth, but in that moment, she realized she didn't need to prove anything. Jack had already seen her for who she was, more than just the maid. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Tiffany sat in the quiet room Jack had guided her to. her mind still racing from everything that had happened. The soft glow of the chandelier in the hallway outside spilled into the room, but it did little to calm the whirlwind of thoughts in her head. She had always prided herself on her ability to keep her emotions in check, but tonight had shattered that. She couldn't shake the feeling of Jack's words. "You're not just some maid, Tiffany. Never forget that." It was as if he had seen something in her that she had never dared to acknowledge in herself. As the minutes passed, Tiffany sat still, trying to breathe through the tension in her chest. She didn't know what to do with herself. It was the first time in a long time she had been offered kindness, not out of obligation, but because someone genuinely cared. The door to the room opened slowly, and Tiffany's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of one of the staff members. A young woman entered, holding a tray with a small meal. Tiffany glanced up, surprised to see a plate of food, something warm, comforting. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until she saw it. The woman set the tray down on the small table in front of Tiffany, giving her a warm smile before she turned to leave. Tiffany nodded her thanks, still unsure how to process everything. She picked up the fork and stared at the food in front of her, but her mind was still elsewhere. Her thoughts kept returning to Jack. What had changed? Why had he defended her when she didn't expect anyone to even notice her? The man who controlled so much, so many lives, had seen her, truly seen her. It was a humbling feeling. Tiffany took a small bite of the food, savoring the warmth and comfort it brought. As she chewed, her mind wandered back to the moment when Jack had intervened. The room had been filled with judgment, with cruel laughter, but in an instant, he had shifted the energy. He hadn't just told the guests off. He had taken control of the entire situation. Tiffany had never seen anyone command that much respect, but there was something about the way he did it. It wasn't with anger, but with quiet confidence. He had made the guests feel small, not by raising his voice, but by showing them their place. And he had made her feel like she mattered. It was surreal. Tiffany had been in this house for months, doing her best to remain invisible, to blend into the background. She had never thought about what she truly wanted. She had simply existed. But now, for the first time, she felt like there might be more for her here than just serving drinks and cleaning dishes. She could feel the weight of Jack's actions pressing down on her, and it was like a door had been opened. Maybe it was because Jack had seen her as more than just the help. He had treated her like an equal, like someone worth protecting. As the minutes passed, Tiffany felt herself growing more and more aware of the shift that had happened. She had been humiliated, yes, but she had also been uplifted. No one had ever stood up for her like that. She had spent so many years trying to go unnoticed, thinking that if she kept her head down and worked hard enough, she would be left alone. But tonight, Jack had made her feel like she mattered. A soft knock at the door pulled Tiffany from her thoughts, and she quickly stood up to answer it. To her surprise, it was Jack himself. He stood in the doorway, looking as composed as ever, but there was something different in his eyes. He didn't speak immediately, just studied her for a moment, as if he was taking in the sight of her in a way he hadn't before. "How are you doing?" Jack asked, his voice calm, but with an undertone of concern that Tiffany hadn't expected. She blinked, unsure of how to respond. "I'm okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for what you did." Jack nodded, stepping into the room. He didn't sit down. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. "I meant what I said," he told her, his gaze steady. "You're not just some maid, Tiffany. You deserve more than this. You don't have to stay in the background, not anymore." Tiffany felt her heart race. Jack had never spoken to her like this before, and she wasn't sure how to react. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, feeling a lump form in her throat. "You don't need to say anything," Jack replied, his voice softer now. "But I want you to understand that I see you. You're more than just a part of the staff here. You're someone who deserves respect." Tiffany swallowed hard, trying to keep her emotions in check. She had never allowed herself to hope for something more, but now, standing here with Jack, she couldn't deny the warmth spreading through her chest. It felt like a weight had been lifted, and for the first time in a long time, she could breathe a little easier. "Thank you," she said again, her voice thick with emotion. Jack gave her a small smile, his eyes softening. "Take the night off," he said. "You've earned it. Rest, and we'll talk more tomorrow. There's no rush." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Tiffany standing there, her thoughts spinning. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, She felt like maybe, just maybe, things were about to change for the better. The following day, Tiffany woke up in the small guest room she had been given, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains. She felt different, more awake than she had in a long time, but also unsure. The events of the previous evening replayed in her mind, and she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. What had started as a routine shift had turned into something that was changing her entire perspective on her place in this world. She had always been the quiet, invisible one, doing her job without drawing attention. But now, Jack Malone had seen her. And not just seen her, but had defended her when no one else would. Tiffany sat up slowly, her mind still racing. She was unsure of what to expect next. Jack had told her to rest for the night. But what would happen when she returned to work? Would things go back to normal? Or would the atmosphere in the mansion be different now that Jack had stepped in? Tiffany shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She couldn't keep thinking like this. She needed to focus on the present, on the fact that she had been given a chance to rest, something she hadn't had in weeks. It felt like a small luxury, but to her, it was everything. As Tiffany got ready for the day, she couldn't help but notice the difference in how she felt. The previous night, she had been filled with anxiety, unsure of what would happen when Jack intervened. But now, there was a quiet sense of confidence she hadn't known she possessed. She wasn't sure how much of it came from Jack's protection or from something inside her, but either way, she felt different. When she entered the kitchen, the staff gave her polite nods, but there was no longer the usual awkwardness. They didn't avoid her gaze like before. She wasn't just another invisible worker to them anymore. That small shift was enough to make her feel like her presence mattered. The house was quieter than usual, and Tiffany couldn't help but wonder if Jack's actions had caused a ripple effect. She had never seen him so decisive, so protective of her. Tiffany couldn't remember the last time someone had made her feel that way, let alone someone as powerful and intimidating as Jack. As the day went on, Tiffany found herself feeling more at ease. There was no tension hanging in the air, no judging eyes following her every move. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe freely. When lunchtime arrived, Tiffany found herself in the staff break room, sitting by the window and eating the sandwich someone had kindly brought her. She could hear the soft hum of the conversation around her, the clink of utensils, but it all felt so distant now. It wasn't just the sandwich that made her feel calm. It was the realization that things were changing. She wasn't just the maid anymore. Tiffany was still processing everything, still trying to figure out where she fit into this new reality, but she couldn't deny that something had shifted inside her. Just as she was about to finish her lunch, there was a soft knock on the door. Tiffany looked up, surprised to see Jack standing there. His presence immediately commanded attention, but today, there was something different about him. He wasn't as intimidating as usual. There was a softness in his expression, a sense of understanding. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Jack asked, his voice calm, but with an undertone of concern. Tiffany nodded, setting her sandwich aside. "Of course." Jack stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, his eyes meeting hers. "I just wanted to check in. How are you feeling today?" he asked, his gaze steady. Tiffany hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't expected him to be so attentive, so considerate. "I'm better," she said softly, her voice uncertain. "Thank you for what you did last night." Jack gave a small nod, his expression serious. "You don't have to thank me for that. It's just the right thing to do." Tiffany looked at him, her heart pounding. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time, she realized just how much he meant the words he spoke. "You don't have to do that for me," Tiffany said, her voice quieter now. "But you did. You didn't have to stand up for me. No one has ever done that before." Jack took a step closer, his eyes softening. "That's because no one else ever should have treated you like that." Tiffany felt her throat tighten. She hadn't expected this conversation, this moment of honesty between them. "I know it's not much, but I want you to know that I see you. I respect you," Jack said, his voice steady but gentle. "And you deserve better than the way you've been treated here." Tiffany couldn't hold back the tears that welled up in her eyes. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, feeling like she didn't matter. But Jack's words made her feel like she was finally seen for who she really was. "Thank you," Tiffany whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled softly, his eyes softening even further. "You don't need to thank me. Just know that you're important, Tiffany." And don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. Tiffany nodded, trying to steady her breath. She wasn't sure where this new connection with Jack would lead, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't just a servant, just an invisible worker. She was someone worth protecting, someone worth respecting. And that made all the difference. The next few days were a whirlwind for Tiffany. She woke up every morning feeling different, as if a new chapter in her life had begun, but the reality of working in the mansion still felt the same. The guests came and went, the high society life continued, and the mansion's opulence surrounded her. But there was something in the air now, something that wasn't there before. Tiffany could feel it every time she entered a room. People were looking at her differently. It wasn't the same as before when she was just the invisible maid, the one who moved quietly in the background. Now, it felt like she was being noticed. And it wasn't just the staff. Even some of the guests who had previously ignored her, or worse, mocked her, began to treat her with a kind of silent respect. It was unsettling, but at the same time, it made Tiffany feel something she hadn't felt in years, seen. It wasn't just about the way people were treating her, though. It was the way Jack Malone had acted, the way he had stood up for her. He hadn't just been a mafia boss making a decision on a whim. He had seen her as a person, not just a part of the staff. Tiffany didn't know if this new dynamic would last. She didn't know what to expect from Jack or the others. But for the first time, she felt like she could breathe easier. The next time Jack approached her, she wasn't sure what to expect. The last few days had been calm, with no further incidents. But she had the sense that things were about to change again. Jack's presence was always commanding, but now there was an added weight to it. Tiffany found herself wondering if the changes in their dynamic were affecting him too. As she worked, she tried to keep her focus on her duties, but the truth was, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Jack had treated her. It wasn't just the way he had defended her. It was the quiet moments between them, the moments when his eyes lingered on her a little longer than usual. It made her feel uneasy, and yet, in some way, it made her feel valued. On a quiet afternoon, when the house was still and most of the staff were away on errands, Jack came into the room where Tiffany was cleaning. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there for a moment, watching her with those sharp eyes. Tiffany paused in her task, surprised by his sudden presence. "I hope you're feeling all right," he said, his voice low, almost casual. Tiffany gave a small nod. "Yes, thank you." There was a brief silence between them, and Tiffany could feel her heart racing. It wasn't often that Jack spoke to her without some formal business being involved. She hadn't expected him to check in on her. "I just wanted to make sure," Jack continued, stepping a little closer. "You've been doing a great job, and I'm grateful for it." Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't been expecting this. Jack, the feared mafia boss, was thanking her? It felt surreal. "Thank you," she replied softly, feeling a flush creep up her neck. "I'm just doing my job." Jack tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "You're doing more than that, Tiffany," he said quietly. "I've noticed, and I want you to know that I don't take that for granted." Tiffany wasn't sure how to respond. She had never been good with compliments, and Jack's words felt like a lot to take in. "I appreciate it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack took a step back, his expression shifting slightly. "You're welcome. Just know that you're respected here, all right?" Tiffany felt her chest tighten. She wasn't sure if she could believe it, but there was something in Jack's voice that made her think he wasn't just saying it to be polite. He meant it. After that brief exchange, Jack left the room as quietly as he had entered, leaving Tiffany standing there, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what had just happened. It wasn't the kind of conversation she ever expected to have with him, and it left her with more questions than answers. She continued her work for the rest of the day, but she couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing, that the relationship between her and Jack was evolving in ways she hadn't anticipated. Later that evening, as the mansion buzzed with the arrival of more guests, Tiffany found herself wondering if Jack's kindness had been a one-time thing. She tried to push the thought aside, focusing on her duties. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't help but think that there was more to Jack than the cold, calculating man everyone else saw. Maybe she was starting to see a different side of him, a side that had been hidden away under layers of power and control. Tiffany didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if Jack's actions were a sign of something more, or if it was just a fleeting moment of kindness in a world that often seemed cold and indifferent. But for the first time in a long time, Tiffany allowed herself to believe that things could be different, that she didn't have to remain invisible, that she didn't have to accept being treated as less than. And as she went about her evening duties, she couldn't help but wonder where this new dynamic with Jack would take her. She wasn't sure, but for the first time in a long while, she was willing to find out. Tiffany spent the next few days navigating the mansion with a sense of cautious optimism. The shift in the air was palpable. The guests continued to come and go, but the feeling of judgment that had once followed her seemed to dissipate. She found herself wondering whether it was just the calm after the storm, or if the change in how she was treated would last. As the days passed, she couldn't help but notice the subtle difference in the way people regarded her. The other staff members, who had always maintained a polite distance, now exchanged nods with her, as if she were part of the team. The guests who had once whispered and sneered, now seemed to keep their distance, almost as if they were unsure of how to behave around her. Tiffany tried not to read too much into it. After all, she was still the maid, still part of the background. But Jack's words lingered in her mind. You're not just some maid, Tiffany. Never forget that. Every time she thought about that, something stirred within her. She wasn't just some maid. That thought had never occurred to her before, but now it felt like the key to something bigger, something she had never allowed herself to consider. Tiffany had always kept her head down, never drawing attention to herself, never challenging the roles others had imposed on her. But now, she found herself wondering what would happen if she stopped hiding. What would happen if she allowed herself to be seen for who she really was, not just through the eyes of others, but through her own eyes. On the 6th day after Jack's intervention, Tiffany was summoned to the main office. She wasn't sure what to expect. Had she done something wrong? Had the shift in how the staff treated her been noticed? As she made her way through the quiet halls, her heart raced. The office was at the far end of the mansion, tucked behind large oak doors. Tiffany hesitated for a moment before knocking lightly. Come in. Jack's voice rang out from within. She opened the door and stepped inside. Jack was seated behind his massive desk, his usual air of authority surrounding him. But today, there was something softer about him. He wasn't in a suit, but in a simple black shirt, his sleeves rolled up. He looked up as she entered, his gaze steady and inviting. Tiffany, Jack said, his voice calm, but with an underlying warmth. Come in. Have a seat. Tiffany hesitated, still unsure of the reason for her summons, but she did as he asked, sitting down in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. Jack studied her for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. I wanted to talk to you about something, he said, his tone more personal than usual. You've been doing a great job, and I've noticed the changes in how the staff is interacting with you. Tiffany felt a wave of warmth spread through her. She hadn't expected him to bring it up. She had always assumed that she would remain invisible, even in her success. But here he was, acknowledging her. Thank you, Tiffany said quietly, her voice betraying a hint of the emotion she had been holding back. But you're right, Jack continued, his eyes softening. I've seen the change, not just in how others are treating you, but in how you carry yourself. It's clear you're more than just the help around here. And I want you to know that you have a place here, not just as an employee, but as someone who is part of this team. Tiffany couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had never thought of herself as part of anything. She had always been on the outside, just trying to survive. The idea that Jack saw her as part of the team was more than she could process. She opened her mouth to speak, but found that the words didn't come. You don't have to say anything right now, Jack added with a small smile. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the value you bring, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. You're not invisible, Tiffany. His words settled in her chest like a warm, comforting weight. It was more than she had ever hoped for, more than she had ever expected from anyone, especially from a man like Jack. She had been just another face in the crowd, another servant in the mansion, but now Jack had made her feel like she mattered. Thank you, Tiffany finally said, her voice thick with emotion. That means more than you know. Jack's expression softened. You're welcome, he said quietly. I just wanted to make sure you knew how much you were appreciated. This place isn't just about the power and the status. It's about people, and I don't want you to forget that. Tiffany nodded, trying to steady her breath. She had no idea what to say, but somehow, she knew that things were shifting, not just in the mansion, but within herself. I'll make sure to keep doing my best, she said, her voice stronger now, more confident. Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes assessing her once more. "I know you will," he said. There was a pause as they both took in the silence of the room. Tiffany felt her heart racing again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, something she had never let herself feel. Hope. "One more thing," Jack added, breaking the silence. "I want you to know that you're not alone here. If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. You have my word." Tiffany was taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. She had never imagined that she would find this kind of support, especially from someone like Jack. "Thank you," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Jack gave her another small smile, a smile that seemed to reach his eyes this time, and nodded. "You're welcome, Tiffany. Now go take the rest of the day off. You've earned it." Tiffany stood up, still processing everything. She had never felt so much at once, grateful, overwhelmed, and hopeful. As she left the office and made her way through the mansion, she couldn't help but feel that something had changed, not just in the way others saw her, but in the way she saw herself. And for the first time in a long time, Tiffany allowed herself to believe that maybe she had a place here, after all. The next few days in the mansion felt different for Tiffany. She woke up with a newfound sense of confidence, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. Every day, she moved through the grand halls with her head held a little higher. The guests still came and went, their laughter and conversations still echoing through the house, but Tiffany no longer felt like an outsider. Jack's words from the previous day had stayed with her, and they seemed to echo in her mind with each step she took. "You're not just some maid, Tiffany. Never forget that." She still couldn't believe he had said those words to her. It was as if a door had opened inside her, a door she hadn't even known was there. She had spent so many years hiding, so many years thinking of herself as just the help, just someone who existed in the background. But now, she realized, she was more than that. Tiffany tried not to think too much about what was to come, but there was a shift. There was a quiet, unspoken understanding between her and Jack. She knew things were different now. One afternoon, Tiffany found herself standing in front of Jack's office, her heart beating faster than usual. She hadn't expected to be called there again so soon, but there she was, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She took a deep breath and knocked softly. "Come in," Jack's voice called out from inside. She opened the door and stepped into the room, the familiar scent of polished wood and leather filling her senses. Jack was sitting behind his desk, as always, but today he looked up at her with a softer expression, one that Tiffany had come to recognize over the past few days. He wasn't the same as the man she had first met, the intimidating Mafia boss who never showed any signs of vulnerability. This was someone different, someone she had started to understand a little more with each passing day. "Tiffany," Jack said, his voice calm. "I'm glad you're here." Tiffany nodded, unsure of what to expect. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steady but still unsure. Jack smiled, but it was a small, thoughtful smile. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," he said. "About you." Tiffany's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected Jack to bring it up so soon. "I meant what I said," he continued, his gaze locking onto hers. "You deserve more than just being invisible here. You deserve a place, not just as part of the staff, but as someone who matters." Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what to say. She had spent so long being ignored, being the one who blended into the background. But Jack was looking at her as though she mattered. For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. Thank you," she finally managed to say. "But what do you mean by that?" Jack leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm offering you something more than just this job," he said. "I want you to be more than just the maid in the background. I want you to help me, Tiffany. I trust you." Tiffany's mind raced. She couldn't process what Jack was saying. He was offering her something beyond cleaning and serving guests? It was hard to imagine. "What exactly are you asking?" Tiffany finally asked, her voice tentative. Jack stood up from behind his desk and walked around to the other side, closer to her. "I need someone who is smart, someone who can handle things behind the scenes. You've already proven yourself to me. I need someone who knows how to handle delicate situations, who can stay calm under pressure." Tiffany felt a rush of emotions, confusion, excitement, and even fear. She had never expected this kind of opportunity. "You want me to work with you?" she asked, trying to make sense of his words. Jack nodded, his eyes focused on hers. Exactly. You've been here long enough to see how things work. I need someone I can rely on, someone who isn't afraid to step up and take charge when needed. I can offer you more than just a position as a maid. I'm offering you a place at my side. Tiffany's head spun. She had always been invisible, always worked in the shadows, but now Jack was asking her to step out of the shadows and into a role that demanded more. Could she do it? Could she really be someone who stood by his side, someone who mattered in a way she had never imagined? She wasn't sure, but the offer felt like a turning point, a chance she had never expected. I don't know if I'm the right person for that, Tiffany said, her voice uncertain. But I'm willing to try, she added, almost without thinking. Jack smiled, a genuine smile that made Tiffany's heart skip a beat. That's all I ask, Tiffany. I want you to know that you have my support, no matter what. You won't be alone in this. You'll have the tools you need to succeed. Tiffany nodded, still trying to process everything he had said. This was more than just an offer. It was a chance to change her life, to finally be seen for who she really was. I'll do my best, Tiffany said quietly, her voice steady now. Jack's smile widened, and for the first time, Tiffany saw something that felt like a mutual respect between them. I know you will, he said, and that's why I trust you. Tiffany left his office that day with a sense of purpose she hadn't known she was capable of. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She had a new role to play, one that she had never imagined, but one that she was determined to embrace. She didn't know exactly where this new path would lead, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to take the next step. The next few days were a blur of new responsibilities for Tiffany. She had been called into Jack's office again, this time to discuss the specifics of her new role. She wasn't just serving drinks anymore or silently cleaning the mansion's vast halls. Jack had made it clear that he saw potential in her, potential she had never allowed herself to see. Tiffany spent the following days working closely with Jack's team, organizing paperwork, managing small tasks that required attention to detail, and navigating the complexities of the mansion's operations. It was overwhelming at first, the sheer amount of work and responsibility that had been thrust upon her. But as time went on, she began to realize that she was capable of handling it. Tiffany had always kept her head down, avoiding anything that might draw attention to herself. But now, she found herself stepping into situations she would have once avoided. She made decisions, offered suggestions, and even found herself communicating directly with some of the higher-ranking staff members. The respect she had always longed for was slowly becoming a reality, and with it, a sense of empowerment she hadn't known she had. It wasn't just about the work she was doing. It was about the way she was being seen, the way Jack had changed her place in this world. As she grew more confident in her new role, Tiffany noticed the shift in how others treated her. The staff, who had once treated her like just another servant, now acknowledged her with a nod or a smile. Even some of the guests, though they still kept their distance, seemed to regard her differently. She was no longer the invisible maid who moved quietly through the background. Tiffany had become someone important, someone who mattered. But it wasn't just the change in how others treated her that affected her most. It was the relationship she was beginning to build with Jack. He had been her protector, her defender, but now, their interactions were more than just professional. There was a respect between them, something unspoken but deeply felt. Tiffany had never imagined that she would find herself working so closely with the man who had once been a distant figure, someone she had only seen from afar. But now, Jack wasn't just the Mafia boss. He was someone she could talk to, someone who trusted her. And that trust meant everything to Tiffany. One afternoon, as they worked together in his office, Jack looked at her with an intensity she hadn't seen before. He had been reviewing documents, but now, his attention was entirely on her. Tiffany, he said, his voice quiet but serious. I've been thinking about your future here. Tiffany looked up, her heart suddenly racing. She had never been good at reading Jack's intentions, and his words left her wondering where this conversation was going. What do you mean? She asked, her voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. Jack leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You've proven yourself, more than I expected, honestly. And I think it's time we start thinking about where you go from here. Tiffany's mind raced. What did he mean? Was he going to send her back to the staff, back to the shadows? Or was this something more? I've been watching you, Tiffany, Jack continued. And I believe you have the potential to be more than just part of the team. I want you to take on more responsibility, to move up within the organization. Tiffany blinked, her mouth suddenly dry. This wasn't what she had expected. She had never thought of herself as someone who could move up in the world, especially not in a place like this. But Jack's words made her believe it might be possible. More responsibility? Tiffany asked, unsure if she had heard him right. Jack nodded. I want you to work directly with me on certain matters, to handle things that require more than just the usual tasks. I think you're ready for it. But it's up to you. Tiffany felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to finally prove that she was more than just a maid. But it also scared her. What if she wasn't ready? What if she failed? I don't know, Tiffany said, her voice shaking slightly. This is a big responsibility. Jack's expression softened. I know it is. But I wouldn't ask you if I didn't believe you could handle it. And you won't be doing this alone. You'll have my support. Tiffany took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. This was what she had wanted, what she had dreamed of when she first arrived at the mansion. But now that it was in front of her, it felt overwhelming. She looked at Jack, his steady gaze locking with hers. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice firmer now. I won't let you down. Jack smiled, a small, approving smile that made her heart skip a beat. I know you won't. Over the next few weeks, Tiffany stepped into her new role with determination. She worked alongside Jack, handling increasingly important tasks, managing the operations of the mansion, and overseeing the guests and staff. It was a challenge, but one she embraced fully. And as she grew into her new responsibilities, she felt more and more like she was truly part of this world. A world that she had once thought was out of reach for someone like her. But now she belonged. And with Jack's support, Tiffany realized that she was no longer the invisible maid in the background. She was someone who had earned her place, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. Days turned into weeks, and Tiffany continued to prove herself in her new role. The mansion, once a place where she had merely existed in the background, had become a space where she was finally seen, where her efforts were acknowledged, and where she was part of something greater than just the mundane tasks she had once carried out. Working directly with Jack Malone, Tiffany found herself involved in decisions that affected the mansion's operations, overseeing guests, managing staff, and even handling sensitive matters that had once been out of her reach. It was daunting at times, but with every challenge, Tiffany grew more confident in her abilities. The respect she had longed for was no longer something she had to earn through silent labor. It was something she had already earned through her competence and dedication. Yet, despite all the changes in her life, there were moments when she would catch herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had gone from being the invisible maid to being someone Jack trusted, someone who could walk into a room and command attention, not because of her title, but because of the respect she had earned. It was a strange feeling, one that filled her with pride, but also with a tinge of uncertainty. She had never imagined this for herself. One evening, as the mansion grew quiet after the guests had left and the staff had gone about their evening duties, Tiffany found herself alone in the study. Jack had asked her to stay behind to review some important documents, and she was grateful for the opportunity to contribute to something so significant. She sat at the large desk, scanning the papers in front of her, but her mind kept drifting. She thought about her life before all of this, the years of struggle, the days of feeling invisible. She thought about the moment when Jack had first stood up for her, how that one act had changed everything. Tiffany had been a survivor, but Jack had shown her that she was capable of so much more. Her reflection was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Jack standing in the doorway, his usual confident demeanor softened by a rare warmth in his eyes. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, his voice casual, though there was a hint of concern in his tone. Tiffany smiled, shaking her head. Not at all. Just going through these papers. It's a bit much, but I'll manage. Jack stepped into the room, his gaze flickering briefly to the papers on the desk. You're doing a great job, Tiffany, he said, his voice filled with approval. I know it's a lot, but I trust you. The words sent a surge of warmth through Tiffany's chest. She had never gotten used to hearing that kind of praise, not in the way Jack said it. There was no condescension, no doubt, just confidence in her abilities. Thank you, she replied quietly, her voice a little softer than usual. Jack took a few steps closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You've come a long way, he said. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. When I first met you, you seemed like someone who was just trying to get through the day, trying to stay out of the way. But now, you're someone who's making a real impact around here. You've earned your place, Tiffany. Tiffany felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he said them, the way he truly saw her. For so long, she had been invisible to everyone, including herself. But Jack had shown her that she mattered. I never imagined this for myself, she said softly, her hands resting on the desk. I never thought I could be part of something like this. Jack's expression softened, and he stepped closer, now standing just a few feet away from her. I've always believed that people have the potential to do more than they realize, he said. And you've proven that. You've taken everything in stride, handled it all with grace, and you've made a real difference here. That's something you should be proud of. Tiffany felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had worked so hard, kept her head down, done everything she could to avoid drawing attention. But now, she realized that it wasn't about staying invisible anymore. It was about showing up, owning her worth, and taking her place in the world. She met Jack's gaze, her heart beating faster. I never thought I could be proud of anything, she said quietly. But now, I am, and I have you to thank for that. Jack's eyes softened even further, and he gave her a small, genuine smile. You've earned it all on your own, Tiffany. I just helped open the door. You walked through it. Tiffany couldn't find the words to respond. She had never expected to have a moment like this with Jack, to feel this level of connection and understanding. But there it was, an unspoken bond that had been built on trust, respect, and a mutual understanding of the challenges they both faced. For the first time in a long while, Tiffany felt truly seen, not just by Jack, but by herself. She had earned her place in the world, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. Thank you, Jack, she said, her voice steady now. For everything. Jack nodded, his smile widening. You don't need to thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. You've got this. As Tiffany left the study that night, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell in her chest. She had come so far, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, and that was a feeling she had never thought she would experience. She was no longer invisible. She was Tiffany Johnson, and she mattered. The days that followed were a blur of activity for Tiffany. She had settled into her new role, a role that she never would have imagined for herself just a few weeks ago. The mansion no longer felt like a cold, imposing place. Instead, it had become a space where she was seen, where her contributions mattered. Tiffany was no longer just the maid. She was a trusted part of Jack Malone's team, handling delicate matters, overseeing the operations of the house, and even managing some of the guests. There was an air of quiet confidence about her now, one that hadn't been there before. She walked through the mansion with a sense of purpose, no longer invisible, but acknowledged and respected. It wasn't just about the work. It was about the way she had earned her place. Tiffany's relationship with Jack had shifted as well. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. Their interactions had grown more personal, built on mutual respect and understanding. Tiffany was no longer the outsider. She had found a place in this world, one she had never expected to be part of. One evening, after the guests had left and the staff was finishing their work, Tiffany found herself in the study once again. The weight of the day had left her exhausted, but there was something else on her mind. She had been thinking about Jack, about the way he had changed her life, and how, despite everything, she still wasn't sure where this path would lead. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Jack standing in the doorway, his usual composed demeanor softened by the look in his eyes. I was hoping I'd find you here, he said, his voice calm. But there was something in his tone that caught Tiffany off guard. It wasn't the usual business-like tone she had come to expect from him. I wanted to talk, Jack continued, stepping into the room. Tiffany sat up straighter, her heart beginning to race. What's on your mind? She asked, her voice steady but with a hint of curiosity. Jack closed the door behind him, his gaze fixed on her. I've been thinking a lot about how things have been going, he said, walking over to the desk where Tiffany sat her day. You've been doing an incredible job, Tiffany. I think it's time we take things to the next level. Tiffany blinked, unsure of what Jack meant. What do you mean? She asked, her pulse quickening. Jack leaned against the desk, his arms crossed. I mean that I want you to be more involved. Not just with the mansion's operations, but with some of the more important business dealings I'm involved in. Tiffany's mind raced. Business dealings? She repeated, surprised. Jack nodded. Yes, I trust you. I've seen how you handle things. I believe you have the potential to do more than just run the house. You're smart, capable, and I think it's time you start managing some of the more significant parts of my empire. Tiffany's heart skipped a beat. She had never thought about herself in such terms. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice quiet. Jack smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened his usually stern expression. I wouldn't be offering if I didn't believe in you, Tiffany. I've seen how you've grown, how you've stepped up to challenges. I need someone I can trust, someone who won't back down when things get tough. Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. This was more than just a job offer. It was an opportunity to become someone important, someone who had a say in the decisions that shaped the world she had entered. But with that came a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Jack's eyes softened, and he took a step closer. You're more ready than you think. I've seen you handle pressure. You've already proven yourself to me and to everyone around here. This is just the next step. Tiffany's thoughts swirled. This was everything she had dreamed of when she first arrived at the mansion. The chance to make something of herself, to prove that she was more than just the maid. But now that it was in front of her, it felt overwhelming. I won't let you down, she said finally, her voice steady. Jack gave her a small nod, his expression approving. I know you won't, he said. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes about the trust he had in her. We'll take it one step at a time. I'll help you adjust to this new role. You won't be doing it alone. Tiffany looked up at him, her heart filled with gratitude. She had never imagined that she would be in this position, that she would be standing here, talking to Jack as an equal, not just as someone who served him. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled and turned to leave, pausing at the door. Take some time to think about it, he said. But know that I believe in you. This is your chance, Tiffany. Don't let it slip away. As Jack walked out of the room, Tiffany sat back in her chair, her mind spinning. She had come so far, and yet she was standing at the edge of something even bigger. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was someone who had the chance to shape her own future, and for the first time in her life, she felt ready to take that step. Tiffany spent the next few days in deep contemplation. Jack's offer lingered in her mind, a challenge she had never expected to face. She had never been one to step out of her comfort zone, and now, with a chance to prove herself in ways she never imagined, she was unsure whether she was ready for the responsibility that came with it. The mansion, with its polished floors, grand staircases, and walls adorned with expensive art, felt both welcoming and intimidating. She had spent so much of her life blending into the background, but now the future seemed open, and the weight of that openness was both exciting and overwhelming. As the days passed, Tiffany found herself immersed in the tasks Jack had set for her. She was no longer just managing the operations of the house. Now, she was involved in planning and organizing, participating in meetings, making decisions that affected the flow of everything in the mansion. Every decision, no matter how small, felt like a test, but she was determined to prove herself. At first, the transition was harder than she had anticipated. There were moments of doubt, moments when she questioned if she was truly cut out for this role. She had always been the one in the background, and now, she was being asked to step forward and take control. But as time went on, Tiffany found her footing. She began to anticipate Jack's needs before he asked for them. She developed her own strategies for managing the staff, and she became more confident in her ability to handle the complexities of the mansion's operations. One evening, after a long day of overseeing the staff and managing the guest arrangements, Tiffany found herself in Jack's office once again. It was late, and the mansion had grown quiet. She was seated at the desk, reviewing some paperwork, when Jack entered. His presence, as always, was commanding, but tonight there was something different in his demeanor. He wasn't here for business, not this time. I've been watching you, Jack said, his voice soft, but carrying an authority that immediately caught Tiffany's attention. She looked up, meeting his gaze. And? She asked, trying to keep her tone neutral, though she could feel her heart race. Jack took a few steps closer to the desk, leaning against the edge. You've exceeded my expectations, Tiffany. I knew you had potential, but you've shown me that you're not just capable, You're excellent. Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't used to hearing such praise, especially not from someone like Jack, whose standards were notoriously high. I just did what I thought needed to be done, Tiffany said quietly. That's what I've been trying to teach you, Jack replied, his voice steady. But there was a hint of something else in it, something softer. You didn't just follow orders. You took initiative. You're not just a part of the team now, Tiffany. You're a leader. Tiffany swallowed hard. She had never thought of herself as a leader. She had always been the one in the background, the one who followed, not the one who made decisions. But hearing Jack say it made something shift inside her. I still have a lot to learn, she said, her voice uncertain. Jack smiled, a rare smile that reached his eyes. We all do. But you've shown me that you're ready to take the next step. And I want you to know that I'm here to guide you, every step of the way. Tiffany looked down, feeling a swell of emotions. She had never imagined she would be standing here, in this position, with Jack of all people, discussing her future. She had always felt small, invisible, but now, she was being told she was more. Thank you, she said softly. Jack's smile deepened, and for a moment, the air between them felt less like employer and employee, and more like two people who understood each other. Don't thank me, he said. Thank yourself. You've earned this. As Tiffany sat there, processing Jack's words, a sense of clarity washed over her. She wasn't just trying to survive anymore. She wasn't just doing the bare minimum to get by. She was stepping into a role she never thought she could have, and she was ready to own it. It was a strange feeling, but it was also liberating. The rest of the evening passed by quickly, but Tiffany's mind was still racing. She had a lot to think about. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to walk now. And for the first time, Tiffany felt like she was in control of her own future. The next morning, she walked through the mansion with a renewed sense of purpose. She greeted the staff with confidence, made decisions without hesitation, and continued to prove herself in ways she had never imagined. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she knew that the journey ahead was only just beginning. As the days passed, Tiffany found herself growing more into the person she had always hoped to be. She had earned the respect of the staff, the trust of Jack, and most importantly, she had earned her own respect. The mansion that had once seemed like a place where she didn't belong had become her domain. Tiffany had found her place, and it was one that no one could take away from her. She wasn't just here to serve anymore. She was here to lead, to thrive, and to shape her own destiny. And with Jack by her side, she knew there was no limit to what she could achieve. Tiffany's world had shifted in ways she couldn't have imagined just a few months ago. The mansion, once a place of endless duties and silent service, had become her arena. Every day, she stepped into new roles, her responsibilities growing with each task. The staff began to rely on her judgment. Jack trusted her to make decisions, and slowly but surely, she carved out a place for herself in this world that had once seemed so foreign to her. It wasn't just the respect she had earned, but the trust. That was what felt different now. Tiffany wasn't just following orders anymore. She was leading, she was making things happen. But there was still one thing on her mind, a question she couldn't shake. What was next? She had spent her whole life surviving, staying out of the way, never asking for more than what was handed to her. But now, with this new role, this new responsibility, she wondered what Jack expected from her. Was she still just his employee? Or had she become something more? One evening, after a long day of meetings and organizing, Tiffany found herself in Jack's office once again. She had been working tirelessly, trying to prove to herself that she was worthy of this new role. She didn't know what Jack wanted from her, but she knew one thing for certain. He had put his faith in her, and she wasn't about to let him down. As she entered the office, she found Jack sitting at his desk, as usual. But tonight there was something different in the air. The usual tension that came with being in his presence was absent. Instead, there was an openness, a quiet understanding between them. Jack looked up when she entered, his eyes meeting hers with a sense of warmth. "Tiffany," he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of something deeper. "Come in, have a seat." Tiffany hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from him, her heart beating faster than usual. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steady but with an underlying curiosity. Jack leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the desk in front of him. "I've been thinking," he began, his eyes never leaving hers. You've come a long way. I've watched you grow, take on more responsibility, and handle everything with confidence. Tiffany's heart raced at his words. Thank you, she said quietly, unsure where this conversation was heading. Jack's gaze softened. You've earned my respect, Tiffany, he said, his voice steady. But I think it's time we have an honest conversation about where this is all going. Tiffany blinked, confused. What do you mean? She asked. Jack looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. I've never seen someone adapt so quickly to this life, to the responsibilities that come with it. You've handled everything with a grace I didn't expect, and it's clear to me now that you're not just capable, you're essential. Tiffany felt a rush of emotions at his words. She had worked so hard, never imagining that she would reach a point where she felt like she truly belonged. She had always thought she was just a temporary fixture in this world, but now, with Jack's words, it felt like she was something more. You've proven yourself, Jack continued, and I think it's time to take things to the next level. You're ready for more, Tiffany. I want you to be more than just part of the team. I want you to have a say in the direction of this business, in the decisions that shape what happens here. Tiffany's mind raced. This was more than she had ever expected. She had worked hard, yes, but she had never imagined that Jack would entrust her with such responsibility. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she said softly, unsure of what to say. Jack's expression softened, and he leaned back in his chair. You've been ready from the start, he said. I've watched you handle everything with skill. You've made difficult decisions, kept your composure when things got tough, and you've earned the trust of everyone here. Now it's time for you to take the reins. I want you to have a seat at the table, Tiffany. Your input matters. Tiffany's heart was racing, her thoughts swirling. She had spent her whole life wondering if she was enough, if she could do more than just survive. But now, Jack was giving her a chance to thrive, to be a part of something bigger than herself. I'll do it, Tiffany said, her voice steady now. I'm ready. Jack gave her a small smile, one that carried with it a sense of approval. I knew you would be, he said. You're not just here to serve, Tiffany. You're here to lead. And I'll be right here, supporting you every step of the way. As Tiffany left the office that night, her mind was spinning. She had just been given an opportunity she had never imagined for herself. A chance to be more, to do more. It was everything she had wanted, and yet, it felt overwhelming. But as she walked through the mansion, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had earned her place here, and now, it was time to take the next step. Tiffany was no longer just the maid. She was a leader, someone who had earned her seat at the table. And with Jack by her side, she knew there was no limit to what she could achieve. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. For Tiffany, she had fully embraced her new role, taking on tasks that once seemed impossible, making decisions that affected not only the mansion but the very direction of Jack's operations. Each day was a new challenge, but with each passing day, she felt more confident in her abilities. Jack had given her more responsibility, yes, but he had also given her something even more valuable, his trust. The trust of someone who was known for being unapproachable, a man who had built an empire on power and control. It wasn't just about what she was doing. It was about the fact that Jack believed in her, and that belief fueled her determination. Tiffany had always doubted her own worth, always felt like she was destined to remain in the background. But now, she had earned her place at the table, and it was a place that no one could take away from her. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of handling business matters, Tiffany found herself alone in the study once again. She had just finished going through a series of reports when she felt a familiar presence in the doorway. Jack. He stepped into the room, his usual confident demeanor softened by the quiet understanding in his eyes. Tiffany, he said, his voice steady but warm. I've been thinking. Tiffany looked up, surprised by the tone in his voice. About what? She asked, curious. Jack smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made Tiffany's heart skip a beat. About how far you've come, he said, his voice filled with appreciation. When you first came here, you were just trying to make it through the day. Now look at you. You're running things, making decisions, handling everything with a level of grace I didn't expect. Tiffany's heart swelled with pride, but she quickly reminded herself to stay humble. I've just been doing my job, she replied softly, but her voice betrayed a hint of emotion. Jack shook his head, his expression serious now. It's more than that, he said, stepping closer to her. You've earned my respect, Tiffany. And not just mine. The respect of everyone here. You've proven that you're more than just the maid, more than just the person who serves and cleans. You're a leader, and I don't say that lightly. Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. She had always wanted to hear that, wanted to know that her hard work hadn't gone unnoticed, that she had made a difference. But to hear Jack say it so plainly, to hear the admiration in his voice, made her realize just how far she had come. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. You've said enough, Jack replied, his gaze softening. You've earned everything you have. And I want you to know that you're not just part of this house, Tiffany. You're part of something much bigger. You're helping shape the future of this business. Tiffany felt a lump form in her throat, but this time, it wasn't from doubt. It was from the overwhelming sense of pride and gratitude she felt in this moment. She had worked so hard to prove herself, and now, standing here with Jack, she realized that she had finally done it. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing in me. Jack's smile widened, and for a moment, Tiffany saw him not just as the Mafia boss, but as someone who genuinely cared. You don't need to thank me, he said. You've earned this on your own. All I did was give you a chance. You took it from there. Tiffany nodded, feeling a surge of confidence wash over her. She had earned her place in this world. She wasn't just a servant anymore. She wasn't just someone who cleaned and served. She was Tiffany Johnson, a woman who had built her own success, who had earned the respect of the most powerful man in the room. The man who had once been a distant figure to her was now her ally, her mentor, and, in a way, her equal. As Jack turned to leave the room, he paused at the door. One more thing, he said, glancing back at her. You've proven yourself, Tiffany, and I want you to know that you have my full support in whatever you decide to do next. This is just the beginning for you, and I'll be right here every step of the way. Tiffany watched him leave, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come so far, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time, she felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next, ready to step into the future she had once only dreamed of. With Jack's support, Tiffany knew there was no limit to what she could achieve. She wasn't just here to survive anymore. She was here to thrive. And nothing, not even her past, could hold her back now.